Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Weekly Roar. It's great to have you all back here in the Lion's Den for this week's watch party. Today, I'm talking about another pivot as we continue with my series called Inevitable Change, Making Pivots in Your Leadership. But before we get into all that, I'm Greg Storch, the founder of Lion Enterprise, a leadership development and coaching company where I focus on helping organizations create winning cultures. I'm a certified professional coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. Last week, I spoke about the pivot away from trying to be a people pleaser, trying to make everybody happy. I shared with everyone why one of the most important things we can do for our followers is to challenge them, because that's how they grow. But sometimes we just want to please them instead, and so they go unchallenged. If you missed all of that and weren't able to see the Weekly Roar last Wednesday, don't worry, I got you covered. Head over to my website, www.lion-enterprise.com. Check out video 76, and that'll get you last week's session in the Lion's Pride Library, where you can also find all of my other videos. The Lion's Pride Library is free, and it's a great way for you to get more of the roar. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about another pivot that we could potentially need to make in our own leadership, and it's the pivot we can make to move from stagnation to creation. This pivot is about the importance to develop an abundance mindset that's going to allow us to get into a more creative zone in our leadership. So if you're stuck in a box of doing the same old thing and never trying something different, then you may want to consider making a pivot here. Back in the 80s, they launched this TV commercial featuring Fred the Baker. That commercial, I think, ran all the way through, I think, the mid-90s. Now, you probably don't recognize the name Fred the Baker, but I'm sure you'll recognize the signature tagline. He's the guy who delivered the line, "Time to make the donuts." That commercial was for Dunkin' Donuts, and it featured this baker, and it showed these repetitive scenes of Fred leaving his house early in the morning and saying, "Time to make the donuts," and then coming back later at night, returning through the door saying, "I made the donuts." And they would just keep showing that, leaving, coming back. "Time to make the donuts. I made the donuts." How many people do you know are like Fred the Baker? Poor Fred. He just kept maintaining the course and speed day in and day out. He was literally stuck in a box, a donut box. Now, that's what I would call a maintenance mindset, a fixed brain mentality. Just continue on doing the same things over and over again without question, as long as those donuts got made, right? The problem is that when we maintain that kind of thinking, we never consider anything else. Fred probably never considered a better way to make the donuts because he was stuck in an infinite donut making loop. I'm sitting here thinking about my leadership journey, and as far back as I can go, all the way back to when I was a young petty officer in the Navy and was given responsibility to lead others, I would always hear this one common response from people when I'd ask them why we were doing things a certain way. If you know what I'm talking about, go ahead and type it in the comments real fast. What was that response I would always get from people when I would say, why do we do it like that? Yes, that's right. The answer I always would get was because that's the way we've always done it. Ugh, it just makes me shake my head every time I hear it. It make when people tell me that, it makes me think of one of Henry Ford's best quotes. If you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. It's a trap, and lots of people tend to fall right into it for multiple reasons. But this is why I wanted to talk about this pivot today, because it's important that leaders start to make the move from being stagnant, thinking inside the box, to thinking outside the box, creation. And that reminds me of another commercial. And this one was from Taco Bell that started back in the early 2000s. Back then, Taco Bell was urging people to think outside the bun to promote patrons to switch from the fast food burger joints to tacos and burritos. It was, of course, a take on think outside the box, which is a catchphrase used to encourage people to get creative. Some of the ways that leaders can think outside the bun is to ask questions, explore, and challenge the status quo. When we start to foster a more creative side in our leadership, we open the door to innovation. See, innovation is change, and change is growth. And that's why it's important for leaders to get creative and innovate. Because if you're not growing, you're dying. And who wants to follow a leader who isn't going anywhere? Depending on our tendencies as people, where we feel most comfortable lingering has an impact on how we live and lead others, and certainly has an impact on what we can achieve. Now, I know every one of you has heard of the comfort zone. If you're a growth-minded person and you have never heard a reference to the comfort zone, well, I would submit to you that you don't really understand growth very well. The comfort zone is exactly what it says. It's that feeling, those thoughts, the actions or inactions and behaviors that we engage in that keep us right where we've always been. It's comfortable. But how many of you have heard of the coasting zone? Well, it's easily identifiable in others. These are the people who typically do as little as possible. They just tend to stay in their coasting zone. See, coasting requires very little effort. But the thing about coasting is that you're never going to get anywhere of significance if you get anywhere at all by coasting. I once knew this guy who personified this. Now, I have this tendency to ask people what's up when I see them. They'll walk in the USO Center where I volunteer. I'm like, hey, what's up? Now, sometimes I'll get the quick-witted answers like inflation or the sky, or even sometimes I've heard the price of gas. Not this guy. Every time I'd ask this guy what's up, he'd say, as little as possible. Now that was one dude stuck in the coasting zone. I wonder whatever happened to that guy. There's another zone that's just past our comfort zone, and it's characterized by people who are willing to take some risks and are always up for a challenge. These people are sometimes called trailblazers, right? Because they're always trying to do something new, something they've never done before. But This pivot is about turning to the creative zone. It's attempting to think what we've never thought before. This zone is the zone that fosters our abundance mindset and expands our potential, not just as leaders, but as human beings. Take a minute to think about what zone you tend to migrate towards. If I were to venture a guess, I would say many of you probably feel like you're at least outside of the comfort zone and trying to attempt things you've never done before. I could name so many people right now who are doing just that. Some of them are watching this video right now. Or are you stuck in your ways and like to hang in your comfort zone? You think you want to do something different, but when it comes time to take action, you stay right where you're at. Regardless of where you tend to naturally migrate, what zone you tend to hang out in, the good news is that you can actually choose what zone you want to operate in. It just takes a little work, and that work starts on the inside. You probably already know this, but one of the biggest things that keeps us stuck in these zones are our own thoughts. This is a big reason why I speak a lot about how our mindset can change everything. One of the biggest blocks that we have that keeps us from reaching this creativity zone is convincing ourselves through self-talk and our own belief system that we aren't creative. Belief system. It's no coincidence that the initials for belief system are BS. What did you do in kindergarten when you were given a box of crayons and a blank piece of paper? Yeah, you created a drawing from nothing but your own mind. How? The truth is, we were all born with creativity. Some of us have just tucked it away and haven't allowed it to show up for us. We've convinced ourselves, we tell ourselves, we play this thing over and over again saying we aren't creative. One of the things that my wife and her staff have to do is create flyers for the programs and events that they hold at the center. Well, one day after she had hired a new employee, my wife asked her to work on the flyer for an upcoming weekly event. Now, I walked into the center and I saw the new employee staring at the computer screen, and she looked like she had a little bit of panic on her face. So I said, "Hey, is everything okay?" She said, "No, I have to create this flyer and I'm just not creative." You know, I think of the Henry Ford quote that says, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. When you tell yourself you're not creative, then you're not creative." So, see, I come from a relatively artistic family, and I would say that I'm not one to shy away from creativity. As a matter of fact, one of my hobbies is learning computer graphic arts and design. So I went behind the desk and I walked her through a flyer design. Now, I let her do all the work as I guided her on the layout. I'd ask her to make the decisions on colors and which pictures she wanted to use, and even the font style and sizes. I remember her saying several times that she just isn't good at creating stuff like this. She kept repeating it over and over again. She kept playing the message. I started to play a different message for her. She began making new flyers and posters, and when I'd walk in, she would show them to me. I'd give her feedback, and then I would highlight how well she did. I'd be sure to tell her all the things she did right and what I loved about what she had created. After months on end of encouraging her and getting her to change the recording she had stuck on replay in her belief system, she is now producing some of the most sophisticated and aesthetically appealing graphics I've ever seen. I've seen some of her work that has made me actually tell myself that I don't think I could have done something as well as she had. She has certainly removed the block of disbelief. So, if you're a leader who wants to make a pivot from wherever you are now to becoming more creative and innovative, then here are some things that you can start doing now that will help you to make this pivot in that direction. Now, first of all, as the person creating the environment or culture for the teams that you're leading, your organization, for your family or your place of worship or the community that you live in, take the lead to encourage and support a culture of creativity. How do you do that? Well, there's lots of ways to do it, but some of the more common methods can be to celebrate or highlight new ideas. Don't stifle imagination by shooting down new concepts and ideas from the people you're leading. You know what? Downright encourage it. Another thing you can do is to model courage for others. Encourage it. Encourage courage. When you want to encourage people to get creative, you're really asking them to go out on a limb and take a risk. It takes courage to take a risk, right? You got to model that behavior for them. And then one of the other things I can think of is to encourage decision making. Let people make decisions. Whether they're right or wrong, doesn't matter. Encourage it. If they turn out to be the wrong decision, let them fail forward from that. Don't create a fear of failing. That's a sure way to stifle someone's creativity. Okay, so you get the idea there, I hope. The next thing you can do to make that pivot towards creativity is to abandon the old phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I say, if it ain't broke, then break it and find a better way to put it back together. I saw this meme on Instagram a few weeks ago, and the picture was of a man in a business suit. He had a cigar in hand, and he was sitting on the back of a yacht. And the caption on the meme read, "Life doesn't get any better than this." You know what? If that's what you think, you're right. It won't get any better than that one moment in time because you don't believe you can make it better. Everything can be better. And as leaders, we need to be the ones to spearhead the change. Leaders have to be the catalyst for improvement. When you continue to look for ways to improve, when you become creative, you possess the ability to start to exceed expectations. Now, I think you should be getting the idea about now of why it's so important to move from stagnation to creation. As leaders, we must get away from the status quo and doing things because they're proven methods that keep us doing the same things over and over again. Making this pivot towards creativity allows us as leaders to respond to changes in our environment because creativity adds. It allows us to take our followers on a journey of abundance and opportunities. Now, if you want to be the best leader you can be, you have to be willing to get away from what's familiar, that comfort zone, and get uncomfortable. If you feel comfortable because your stagnation is stopping your creation, then start making an effort to shift to an abundance mindset. Get creative. Challenge the status quo. Ask why. Build a better mousetrap. Believe that everything can be better than it currently is, and encourage others to think that very same way as you do. We were born to create. And if you want to be a better leader, you should make the pivot away from going with what you know to creating a whole new show. What do you think about that? All right, everybody, there's another pivot for you to consider from inevitable change, making pivots in your leadership. Thanks so much for tuning again for the weekly roar. As always, I hope you know how much that I appreciate you supporting me week after week for these lessons in leadership. Remember, please help me to influence other leaders and help them to grow by sharing out this link to the weekly roar video that I'm going to post in the Lion's Den Facebook page right after this watch party's over. Now, I'm going to be back here next week in the Lion's Den speaking about another pivot that we can make in our leadership. Next week, I want to talk about making the pivot away from worrying about yourself and how far you can get to helping others reach the pinnacle of success so we all can enjoy the view from the top together. It's another lesson on changing our focus from me to we. I hope you're going to join me next week. All right, everybody, until we meet again, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.